Welcome back to the Ministry of Propaganda podcast. Today we've got Eyad Marshall. He is a Palestinian activist, human rights activist, currently residing in Ireland and coming to us as a member of the Communist Party of Ireland. So, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
So, just to give a bit of backstory, obviously we've known each other for some time. We actually met coming on 8 years ago it was in Ramallah, wasn't it, where we first met each other in Palestine?
Yeah, it was.
All those moons ago. Unfortunately, it feels like a lot has changed. A lot has stayed exactly the same. If we were to guess where we were back in 2015 when we first met, the situation in Palestine and Israel today, I feel like we'd be a bit more optimistic. Do you reckon that optimism was misplaced? Where are we today, do you reckon?
Well, no, listen, so in order for us to continue to exist as Palestinians, we always have to have the optimism. Every day for us, we can't, you see, the situation we're in, we can't lose hope. Yeah. So we're always searching for hope, and we're optimistic that things will change because we are the rightful in this struggle, and we know that the good will beat evil one day. So that's what we're counting on. As in things on the ground, really, it's been a roller coaster of change in politics within the Israeli governments. Didn't really change much for us, seeing as how they seem to get their way doing what they do without any punishment or any denunciation of any of the international like superpowers around. So the situation hasn't improved much for us, but we see change within the Israeli community itself. There is a lot of voices nowadays, a lot more louder, speaking of the injustices that are happening to our people. So that's at least that's the optimistic bit that I can highlight for now.
Yeah, that is something that I've sort of noticed myself, to be honest. I remember must have been about 10 years ago, Abby Martin, that journalist as part of the Empire Files on YouTube. She did an expose where she went into the streets of Israel, speaking to people about their opinions on the conflict then. And one comment that always stuck in my head of some Israeli guy saying that he classes himself as a bit of a leftist, but in Israeli society, leftist and liberal is a very dirty word. The incredibly niche, and just the right wing, almost Zionist orthodox view.
Yeah,
it was not just the mainstream, but the overwhelming majority, and it does seem to be changing on the streets. In the Knesset, things are very much how they always have been, I feel, but in the streets at least. I feel like we did say this like 10 years ago, but in public opinion, Palestine has already won on the world stage. The public are with Palestine. It's getting the governments to change their policies and their opinions. Unfortunately, with a power base as strong as Israel, it's very difficult, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Now, let me just tell you here that during one of the elections in the United States, they asked Fidel Castro, which candidate would you lean towards to make the situation better with yourselves? And his answer was like, do you have a preference between your left shoe or right shoe? It's the same shoes. But that was his answer then, and that would be my answer now. Any change of politics, whether it seems to be going towards the left or right within the Israelis, the outcomes are the same. Because I can tell you something now, Chris. In the last government before Bibi came back for the sixth time, they are now the opposition. But what did they do? Yeah. What did they do? Have they not murdered Shireen Abu Akleh? Have they not killed innocent protesters? Have they not killed innocent people going to work? Children. The outcomes for us are pretty much the same. The only thing that you need to that can create change is the fact that the Israelis now have woken up to a fact that the extreme religious groups that they have are not paying taxes. They're multiplying because they don't work, and they're doing the extreme, radical thing where they're just focused on their, religious practices and all these other things that they do. And because their numbers are increasing, and they're now reaching to be at least near the 50%, and they're demanding to take power. And that is bad for the other side of the Israeli community, because it's taken a lot from them. Now the direction is, which you've seen, everybody obviously has seen, that there's been riots and protests in Israel. Thousands of people are going down to the streets. And that is because Netanyahu, he's corrupt. He's been in court for corruption before in Israel. And he wants to protect himself, like do a blanket immunity kind of thing by changing the laws that they have to protect himself. And the only way he can do it is by siding with those groups. So he brought the likes of Ben Gvir and Smotrich. These people are troublemakers. They've been in courts, Israeli courts. Even the Israeli extremists think they're extremists.
Yes.
Their idol is Goldstein, the guy who went into the in Hebron and shot the people praying while they were praying. He killed 50 people. That man. That's their idol. He's their hero. So even in the eyes of it, left but still very national proud of the entity of Zionist entity of Israel, this change of dynamics within the Israeli community and the population are not allowed, because they're taking their freedom as well. They're not only our freedom has been taken a long time ago now, but we hopefully will get it back. But they're going to be taken their own people's freedom on the other side of the equation. So that's what makes them now rise and realize, look, that something has to change here.
Yeah, exactly. And this judicial change that's been causing these protests in Israel that Bibi has been trying to put through. Of course, he's been doing this as a direct response to his own indictments for corruption. He's doing this for personal reasons, and like you said, it's almost selling your soul to the devil that he's had to make these pacts with some of the most extreme politicians in Israel. The guy who's just been made Minister of National Security, who has been leading Zionist marches to the Temple Mount, incredible inflammatory man who wants to make his own National Guard that is basically only answerable to himself, basically a Jewish SS. I don't think it's derogatory for me to say that.
It's not.
This is, and it almost feels to me that in the West, a lot of people will instantly say, "Oh, you're an anti-Semite" if you equate Zionism with fascism. But there were always historical links between the two. There was a saying that one of our mutual friends used to always say, that the only things the Zionists learned from the Nazis is how to be them. The only thing that they really omitted was the anti-Zionist, the anti-Semitism. The rest of it they just picked up and went with.
Same exact. And look, the thing is now, it used to be a belief that they tried to hide by political and diplomatic training. But today, you see this Ben Gvir terrorist. He wants his own army, and not the army that belongs to the country. He wants to rule a militia. In a way, look, this is the examples of this. Like, there was a deployment of a certain militia as such in the north of the island of Ireland. And the things they've done back then, they're called the Black and Tan. I'm sure you're aware of this, but the things they've done then are just similar to what the Nazis done, are similar to what the Israelis are doing, but it's going to get a lot worse. And the thing is, you have to keep in mind that, as an example from what we're seeing in the news every day about Sudan. So in Sudan, they have a leader of the army and they have a militia leader. Now they're fighting amongst each other. Now, think about this. If Ben Gvir wasn't given his way, what is he going to do?
Yeah.
You don't really need to research this. The man is insane.
Yeah.
He's openly calling for the killing of children and women and men, innocent, all of that. He doesn't care.
Yeah.
And I don't see how you can call yourself the only diplomatic state in the whole Middle East when you have someone like that representing you. Also, the other guy we forgot to mention, Smotrich, is the Minister of Finance. He was brought in from on the same crew with Ben Gvir. That man, about 2 weeks ago, was standing open in a state conference, speaking on how Israel's borders are from Furat in Iraq all the way to the Nile in Egypt. And they're saying Jordan belongs to us. So even Jordan, they're mentally occupying Jordan right now. They're getting prepared to do that. That is very provocative and internationally frowned upon. You cannot say things like that, but they get away with it. That's the point. They do get away with it. Like idiots, but they're not. They're carrying on a propaganda. That's the same propaganda that the Zionist entity of Israel was created upon. That's what they originally wanted. And that's what these kids are going after now. So,
yeah, I was going to say it in terms of how much they do get away with, which is so shocking to people who don't follow it, because obviously we've got a war in Europe at the moment. So every time there's a strike, everyone in the West collectively gasps like, "Oh, attacking your neighbor." But every other week, you hear a passive story that Israel's just fired rockets into Damascus. Is Israel at war with Syria? No, they just do it arbitrary, and nobody bats an eyelid. Nobody says, "Hang on, should you just be willy-nilly attacking your neighbor?" Is not attacking you, war with you since the 60s, and the constant threats of war between Israel and Iran. Was it last year where they killed some nuclear scientists in Iran? And it was like something out of James Bond. It was a machine gun in a car, an automated machine gun with no shooter.
Yeah. No,
but again, it's absolutely fine because Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East,
yes.
as they keep saying.
Yes. So look, the way things are going are obviously exposing the politics and the double standard of the only unilateral power in the world at the minute, which is the United States of America. It feels like, and I'm pretty sure almost that they have a secret ceremony where whoever is going to run for president has to go and vow and bow to serve the Zionist movement in the world before they get appointed in the United States. As we've seen, there's videos surfaced of probably the only one sentence that Joe Biden had said without messing it up is that I don't have to be Jewish to be a Zionist. I am a Zionist, and if I have to choose, I will go over back again in life, and I'll be a Zionist over and over again. He said that, and then you have Trump, yeah? And the connections that he has with the Zionist movement. Now, if we're going to talk about Trump, we're probably going to spend the whole time.
Christians in America. Yeah. Well, I think Obama once pointed out in one of his interviews, in one of his more opponent sort of interviews, where he said the main job of America is to ensure that America's got oil. And I always view Israel as it's America's sphere of influence in the Middle East, which is why they are allowed to get away with anything. Since we've entered the new era of sort of imperialism, where the old style of colonialism became unfashionable, you couldn't just turn up to countries of foreign countries and install white leaders and expect that to be fine like it was back in the day. But it's a modern version of that. It keeps a sphere of the oil flowing, everybody in check in the region, a nuclear power that has never admitted to having nukes, which is insane.
No, I mean, the Dimona nuclear power plant is very clear. You can see it even on your Samsung phone camera, or whatever camera you use. You don't even have to fly a drone above it. It's right there. Now, let me get back to something you said, Chris. Palestine's geographic location, it separates. So the idea came before the establishment of that state. The decision was by the colonialist powers at the time is that how do we not have a unity in Arab-rich countries because of the natural resources at the time? And the decision was that in order for them to split after it was being studied before the collapse of the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah.
But the idea was set in place that in order for them to separate Asia from North Africa and split the Arabs in half, they have to pick somewhere to destroy and install their own, people in. And it was great because, as you know, that Palestine has a lot of religious significance.
Yeah.
So they have them to play on the reason of back in the day, 5,000 years ago, a certain tribe lived here. Now, I'm sure that tribe wasn't from Poland or Russia, as the ones that live here today. Yeah. And the other thing that also, I'll come back to that now about, the background and the ethnic background of the struggle, that they claim they're rightful owners of our land. So they installed Israel there for the main purpose of keeping control of the natural resources going between the west and east, with Europe and with Asia and North Africa. So that's mainly what it is. So you're 100% spot on in the sense that the natural resources were the main reason. There was nothing else between us and them. We've never, and just to go back to what I said earlier, when the Jewish refugees arrived to Palestine, the Palestinian men and women were standing on two sides of the street throwing roses at them because they're saying, "Welcome, you need us, and we're here for you."
Yeah,
they weren't attacked. They were welcomed. We have still people from the Jewish faith living in Nablus, Samari, they're there, and nobody ever bothers them. In fact, they'll be the first ones at the checkpoint when things heat up.
Yeah, I've met Jews myself in Nablus who are Palestinian.
Yes, and they're no less Palestinian than me or any other Palestinian. In fact, we love each other as Palestinians. As a makeup of us, we don't really differentiate based on religion or ethnic minorities. You've lived there. We have people from Durzi, ethnic minority there. We have Kurdish people. We have people from everywhere. And it's never been a problem, even under the struggle we have and whatever the Israelis are trying to install between us. It's not working. Mainly, there is obviously been a divide between the political leaders, but in the same family home in Palestine, you have someone from Fatah, someone from Hamas, someone who's a communist. Never been an issue. So that's the point that I'm trying to get to here. So whenever they came from Europe, because they were seeking refuge, people were happy to have them.
Yeah.
Then was establishment of the Mossad. So this is a fact that I would like for our audience to also to know. Before the creation of the government of Israel, there was the creation of the intelligence, the Mossad. This is the only country in the world, literally, that started by an intelligence group. And that intelligence group, my friend, what they've done is they took obviously support back then from the British government, and they fed it to those Mossad who, in their turn, recruited gangs. And those gangs created massacres in villages. And the way they've done it was not even mentioned in a Quentin Tarantino movie, my friend. It was horrible. There was killing. They were opening the stomachs of pregnant women and hanging the babies by their necks. And they're shooting men by thousands. There are examples of that, in Palestine. And the next village would hear the news that these monsters are coming. So what do? They have nothing. They have no military training. They have no weapons. They have no finances. They have nothing. So they pick up and leave, which led to about 6.5 million Palestinians as refugees today. 70% of Palestinians, 70% of the population of Palestine seek refuge because of that. Another fact: 1 out of 3 refugees in the world today is Palestinians.
Yes,
from Palestine. So it's nobody really talks about that. Nobody talks about the fact that we welcomed them and they started killing us.
Yeah, and in fact, as an anecdote that I remember hearing, when the British first proposed setting up a Jewish state in Palestinian Mandate, when it was under British control, the head rabbi of Jerusalem protested it and wrote a letter saying, "Don't do this. This is a land that for centuries has lived with different religions. This land is the birthplace of Jesus. Muhammad walked here. Moses came here. That this is sacred to all three Abrahamic religions.
Mm-hmm.
Don't give one group not just supremacy over the other, but the most violent form of ethnic authority over the other groups. Zionism wasn't just a religious movement that came. It was a movement of national racism.
That's right. That is right.
And that's what people in the West fail to understand. So many times when I speak to people about Palestine who don't understand it, their base knowledge is it's two countries next to each other that can't get along. I said, no, it's one country on top of another.
No, and do you know what? Just maybe to get on to that question of or the confusion of two countries. So Palestine was 48. The land in 48 was already taken now, and they living in it. Then we went to 67, which is the West Bank. We call it today the West Bank.
Yeah.
The West Bank is 62 of the West Bank is under full Israeli control.
Yes.
Of the space, 62 of it, which leaves 224 small islands of villages and towns in Palestine. They're separated by checkpoints, the wall, and settlements. The apartheid system that they created, and this has been said by leaders of the South African freedom movement that actually ended the apartheid in South Africa. What's going on in Palestine today is above apartheid. It's genocide, really.
Yeah.
So you're talking about 224 small islands and 642 checkpoints that are permanent, other than the temporary ones that come and go. We lose 60 million hours a year on checkpoints just waiting. It cost about 247 million US dollars worth of additional gasoline. This is when you're just waiting there. Environmentally speaking, if you care about the environment, we spent 135,000 more tons of carbon dioxide while we're trying to go to our. It's insane. A trip that takes you 20 minutes takes you 4 hours, and you might get humiliated or killed on the way. You don't know, depending on the mood. So the settlements are illegal by international law. Even the ICJ, the useless organization that gets money from Israel and America to make decisions based on their desire, like whatever happened in Ukraine, within 2 weeks, they had 63 rules against Russia, of sanctions against Russia for their acts against Ukraine, which I understand. I have no problem with that. Yes, it's a military occupation. You should punish them. But 63 within 2 weeks, and not one in 75 years. Where is any sanctions by these people? Where are they? Where is the moral compass go when it's us, and where does it go when somebody else?
Yeah, exactly. Israel have broken more UN resolutions than Saddam Hussein ever did.
Yeah.
And look what happened there. It just shows how useless, for one, how useless an international body the UN is. That literally anyone can go and give a pretty speech, but that is all it ever amounts to. Because America can veto anything. And until recently, there is a line of conversation that we're going to get into later, but it's always been that Israel can act with impunity, and America's always got its back.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So the other thing that there are the segregation created by the Israeli occupation within the West Bank, which they control 62 of. So I'm not really good with math. How much is left for us? 38 after that? Yeah, the 38, 18% of it, of the 38 still, separated by the wall. And the wall is not protecting Palestinians from Israelis. The wall is excluding Palestinians from other Palestinians because they have no right to be in the West Bank in the first place. So the illegal settlements plus the wall, what are you left with? You have 60,000 Palestinians are denied access to services in hospitals and whatnot only on set times. So you have to go between this hour and this hour. And it doesn't matter if it's an emergency. If you have a pregnant woman or someone having a heart attack or a stroke, you're pretty much done, my friend, because they're not allowed. No services and crossing to near towns and villages in 18% of the 38% that we still have left. So we are under settler occupation, which is also something that has not been talked about much. Other than the fact that we're the longest occupation in modern history, we're talking at a type of occupation that's called settler occupation. A lot of people think, they compare Palestine to what's going on to Ukraine today. Now, again, I think what's going on in Ukraine is horrible for the people of Ukraine. Now, I don't feel much sympathy for the government or just the people, obviously, employed by the people. We have a settler occupation, which is completely different than military occupation. Military occupation, they go in, they do what they have to do, and we all agree it's wrong. But settler occupation, they take your land, they take your resources, and you become second, if not third class citizen, and there is no justice for you. And that is represented, obviously, by what they call administrative detention.
Which is a throwback from British rule. The Israelis literally stole it from Britain. Just if you could just explain what that is.
Yeah, so you can be detained, imprisoned, for up to an open amount of time. Nobody really, without having to attend court or get accused of anything. There's a man, he was taken for 10 years. He was actually on hunger strike, not once seen the courtroom. 10 years in detention, not once seen it. And that is certainly a huge breach of human rights. You can't just take someone, not explain to them what they've done, keep them for more than 10 years without even seeing the inside of a courtroom. So we have, you know what? It's unreal what they get away with. It's racial discrimination in the sense that even the water, Israel controls 85% of the water resources from the West Bank. That's water. You can't live without water. They control that. They dispose of their garbage in our villages and towns because they took up the high hilltops and the mountains. So that's where they build their settlements. I'm talking only about the West Bank. So the practices and the way things are going is really scary. That it's not being really disclosed in the way it actually is on the ground. So for the people who ask, is it two countries fighting? It's not. It's really what I said. It's small villages and towns separated by walls and settlers and army and checkpoints, and all the money is taken and all the water is taken, and they can't practice and they can't work and they can't access services. It's a prison.
Yes.
And on top of that,
it's been described by that many, especially Gaza. It is the world's largest open-air prison.
Yeah, and saying that and talking about that, prisons have walls, yeah? We have 850 kilometers in length and 8 meters high wall that I was discussing earlier, I was talking about earlier. It's 3 times as long and twice as high as the Berlin Wall. So, when the international, when the Allies or whoever talks about celebrating the collapse of the Berlin Wall, can they, not think of another wall that hasn't collapsed yet? And why is it there in the first place? If you think walls are wrong, why are you funding this? Again, it's not protecting Israelis from Palestinians. It's only killing Palestinians every day.
And I think what you've just said there, just to touch on that, the point of why are you funding it? Most people don't realize that it is us. This is coming from, in the West, this is our pockets that are being rinsed to pay for this apartheid. We give between Britain, America, and its allies, billions a year to Israel. And it always shocked me when walking through Jerusalem, seeing a Israeli ambulance, and the ambulance on the side of it said, "This has been donated by so-and-so Jewish group in America." So because they're public money doesn't even go into their own system. Every penny that they get goes on military, and then everything else they need is just donated by groups in the West, that civilian groups.
That's right. And just to finish talking about the wall, there is a woman in Bethlehem. She is an old house that's been there for maybe hundreds of years. She goes up to the roof to dry her laundry, to put it. And she received a big delegation of the Israeli army, and she was asked to never go up on her roof. And when she said why, they told her that she is a threat to the wall. How do you threaten a wall? How one woman putting her laundry to dry is a threat to the wall? So, it's it is what it is. But hopefully, this will all go away in our lifetime. I'd like to see that end in our lifetime. Hopefully,
I do have faith in that. I feel like these sort of atrocities have been allowed to get away for so long because people didn't know. Like when you look at like genocides throughout history of things like the killing fields in Cambodia and how it was able to be denied, it's because they lived in a time where they weren't connected like they are now. And these days, everybody's got a cell phone. You can't get away with this type of things that you could back then without it being filmed. An Israeli soldier shooting an armed woman, bang, straight away. It's filmed on YouTube, it's on Facebook, it's on TikTok. Everybody's seen it. And that's the sort of winning of hearts and minds of getting people to understand what's going on. Unfortunately, getting the governments to take action is a much harder task, because as we've seen, the government don't give a shit what the people think. Because as Biden said, I am a Zionist, and he's a Zionist till the day he dies, because that is US interests. And that's what matters to them.
Well, there is a hope at the end of that now we see things change on the international level. There is the BRICS, they call themselves now the Brazil, Algeria, and South Africa, and Russia, and they're now economically are being united, and that what that could do is that they're using their own currencies, and they're no longer dealing with US dollars, and they're controlling the price of oil, opposite to what the American government want. And it hurts the most when it hits the pockets, as we know. The American government is not interested in what the American people want. I mean, there is a school shooting every week in America, and nobody's doing nothing about it, because they're talking about the law that was made during Abraham Lincoln or whoever that was. Oh no, we all have to have guns, and this is killing their children, their people's children. But they don't care about that, because all they care about is finances. They need to sell weapons. They need to manufacture weapons. They need to create fractions in countries where two sides fight each other. They don't care about the innocent people dying. And Israel is a great example of that. You see, Israel, because of Israel, the Americans are selling a lot of weapons to other neighboring Arab countries, either to attack them or to side with them if anybody ever wishes to attack them, like the bin Zayed, the traitor in Emirates, and other examples that I'm not going to get into during this podcast. But that's it. It's all about finances. So when the finances are hit, when the economy is hit, they might start to realize that, look, we might start looking for alternatives and maybe ease off a bit on the Palestinians. And I actually don't see that happening, as they would say that they need to ease off on the Palestinians because it becomes normal for them. But what I'm hoping for is that we no longer have one superpower. We have another one, and like the world should go into three again. So hopefully China will pick up. Don't have much hope that Russia will pick up after what's going on, but I think China is the future now, and the Chinese have a very good international. So the hope that we have now is that, as we've discussed earlier, the American government is not fair, and they're not going to do anything about it. But there is hope now that you see with the way things are going, the economy is going to be a big factor in this, because China and Russia and other countries are uniting together, and they're supporting each other economically, which goes against the US dollar. If in these few coming years that continues to happen, what will happen is that we will not have one unilateral power, one superpower, which is the US, carrying on the same way they did. We have hoped that maybe China and Russia will be at play too. And the policy of China, myself, I'm a big fan of the Chinese Communist Party and their policies on international politics. They don't intervene. They support if you are willing to work with them. They're pretty much fair in their approaches, and what will happen is that maybe the organizations that take decisions to change things will start taking the case of Palestine a lot more seriously when there is somebody else on the table saying, "Look, we are as big here."
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I think like what you say about it is money that rules these sort of decisions, and in this sort of we're now entering this period of the era of multipolarism where America isn't the only power. Of course, with what's going on in Ukraine at the moment, where China have now been mediating peace between Ukraine and Russia, and China have just done the same between Saudi and Iran. So now the Chinese are going to have to go at seeing if they can find something easy now. Let's do Israel and Palestine.
Yeah, I mean, look, utilizing the big bad wolf in children's stories is literally what's going on.
Yeah.
So in order for the US to control the natural resources of Saudi Arabia and other Gulf countries, well, regardless of how insignificant some of them are, but they still have money. What they're doing is that they're threatening that, look, we're going to protect you if Iran attacks you. So they're playing on the Sunni Shiite card. Same thing they're doing. They create these little, like Taiwan, for instance. Oh, we have to protect Taiwan from them, so we have a deal with Japan, so we're just going to keep sending Navy ships to provoke the Chinese. Like, why would you do that? What is Nancy Pelosi doing in Taiwan in the first place, talking to their parliament? What are they trying to do? I mean, this is a lot bigger. They're not going to run over these countries. And listen, I don't care what anybody believes. What's going on in Ukraine? It's not just the Ukrainian army fighting the Russians. I mean, those documents that were released not long ago, they talk about the involvement of the NATO going in, wearing Ukrainian clothes. And that's the same thing, sure, they've done in Iraq. They couldn't go into Al-Fallujah. It took them 18 days to try and enter Fallujah, but then they went in Baghdad for, it took them half an hour to take Baghdad over. But people don't understand. They think, the army, Saddam's people just let him down, and that was that. It wasn't. They deployed some of the guerrilla war tactics that the Israelis are using in Palestinian villages to enter any town because they couldn't do it any other way. They're wearing the Israeli army is wearing the American uniform, and now the NATO is wearing Ukrainian uniform. There is no way Russia is struggling this much with the army of Ukraine. Even Ukrainians don't believe that, by the way. And obviously, the evidence of that is the leak that went on from the Pentagon about the guy who's 22 years old who leaked it to his friends on a chat group. So it's not that, it's not Mission Impossible anymore. Things changed, and people should be aware of that.
Yeah. It's like a quote by Lenin where he says that there are weeks where decades happens, and there are decades where weeks happen. And I feel like we are in a period now where everything is going very quickly. And unfortunately, with a war, the outcome is never certain. What can be a superpower one week is gone the next.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Look, there is 55 journalists who were killed since 2000. Journalists are protected under law not to be, attacked. Healthcare workers, first aid providers, no one has ever been punished to that. And if we have to mention Shireen Abu Akleh here, because you said something about a woman gets shot and nothing is done about it. Shireen Abu Akleh, 25 years reported for Al Jazeera, an international broadcast news station. She was shot and killed in front of the cameras. She was shot by a sniper. She was wearing a helmet. She was wearing all the gear to protect herself from, ricochets or anything. But that guy, he shot her right under her ear, where the only part that the helmet will not cover. And that is not a mistake. You couldn't shoot someone in a place where they will definitely die with a headshot from about 400 meters. They never apologized. That person hasn't
They
served.
denied it at first.
Of course. It was one of the Jenin boys who shot her with a sniper, because Jenin has snipers, Not only that, to get the right picture, don't look at what happened just to Shireen in front of the cameras and them denying it. What was their reaction during Shireen's funeral? They went into the French hospital in Jerusalem and beat the people holding the coffin. They threw gas and tear bombs and sound, and they just beat everyone with some of the guys had fractured the ones holding the coffin. There is video footage of that. In Nalin, I'll give you another example. In Nalin, there is every Friday they go out to protest the wall that have taken their town in half, the village. So one of the guys, and the video is on the internet, and I hope anyone who's interested to see it, go and search. I will certainly not put it in the link because it's very hard to watch. But if you think you're strong enough and you want to see something like this, go for it. Nalin village, a man holding a flag, Palestinian flag, unarmed, standing with a group of protesters, not doing anything, because what are they going to do? There is nothing to throw rocks at in the first place. It's just the wall. They stand against the wall and they chant for freedom. The Israeli army go in, they take the man, they handcuff him, blindfold him, right? Put him on the ground for 2.5 hours. And then the sergeant, the big rank in the army at the time, in that unit, orders one of the soldiers to shoot the man. He shot him 4 times, dead, from 1.5 meter distance, in front of the cameras and the other protesters. Not served a second in jail, not been told off even. And they picked up and left. Nothing happens.
It's with impunity.
Nothing happens.
Constant with impunity, and it doesn't seem to change. One of the ones that always sticks in my head was when we were both there, the case of Baby Ali, who was some settlers had come to Hebron, set fire to a man's house, and the baby was burnt to death in the house, and was released by the Israeli police. No, they burnt the house and the man, and there was no charges ever made.
Yes, I believe there is 2 stories like this. There is Khdir and Ali. The child, the whole family died. The child was burnt badly. The Wabshi family. And then obviously there was a big media thing about it. I think Cristiano Ronaldo sent him a T-shirt or something. It was big at the time. But there's another guy who was abducted. He was with his cousin. The settlers beat him and his cousin up, and they took one of them, Abu Khdir, and the way they did it, they put tires on him and they lit the tires and burnt him to death. And also they celebrated, obviously. It was almost like a ritual for them. They were dancing and singing as they burnt the poor child alive. Ala, I think his name Ala Abu Khdir. I'm sorry, my memory is not great. But this is not because it's not because of my memory. It's because of the reoccurrent happening.
So many,
and you couldn't, But it's all terrible. It's all happening in this day and age, and it's getting worse. Actually, it's the thing about it is the incompetence of the Palestinian political groups to utilize and deploy some sort of resistance is almost never. I think it's never going to happen now. Because we've seen examples of even freedom fighter movements like Jihad al-Islami and Hamas. The last time Israel went into Gaza, they killed members and leaders of the Jihad Islami, and Hamas took side. They let them do it.
Yeah.
In Gaza. This is Gaza, where Hamas reckons they can take over protect and so this incompetence and divide that we have between political parties and their leadership having allegiances to different countries that uh, prohibit them from doing something has led to what we see today. Today, we see individual acts of heroism by people who are not affiliated to any political parties.
Yeah.
There is examples of that from people who never have any, training in military or anything. There's a guy who killed 14 Israelis, and there was a woman and her daughter, and he says to them during he was carrying out his operation, he said to them, "I don't shoot innocent people. I don't shoot women. Please go." And the woman was on national TV in Israel and said he told her that because they had obviously to question why wasn't she shot, and she says to them,
Yeah.
"Look, the guy was doing that, and he told me I don't hurt innocent people. I don't hurt children. Go." And this guy doesn't have the code of conduct training by the army, like you think these guys had. They don't. But so what you see today is acts, individual acts, people who have suffered, people have been traumatized. Generations after generations have been traumatized by the occupation and what it's doing to them. Someone who lost a close friend, someone who lost a parent. Like Khairi Alqam, that guy from not long ago, they had settlers had killed his grandfather. He's named after his grandfather, Khairi.
Yeah.
They killed him in the same street. When the kid reached the age of 18, he's seen things aren't slowing down, and settlers are even getting worse. So he went out and he done an operation in front of what they say it was in front of their temple, but it wasn't really. It wasn't. I think 7 was the result of that. He was obviously then he fought back and he was murdered on scene. But listen, the thing is, even we were told after the peace that we actually every single human being, Palestinian or Palestinian activist from other nationalities, because it's a global matter. It's not local for us. There's a lot of people who feel for us and who actually are invested in this. Like, the ones I actually really have to salute the Irish Solidarity Campaign for Palestine. They're doing great work. There's a lot of groups like that around in the UK and everywhere, including yourself, Chris. This is personal for you as well. So it's not just about Palestinians. Now, what I'm trying to say here is that what is going on is that they need to start shedding light to the fact that these people in Palestine, I personally, every one of us has given everything to the peace.
Yes.
And there is no results. We were trying to build relationships. They were planning on how to take more from us. We chant for freedom. They chant for our death. We try to see change in their communities. The change is only happening when their freedom is attacked, not ours. Our freedom has always been attacked. For them, it's become normal. It's a normalization of dehumanization of the Palestinian people. So it's also really good to see when the news says Israel is denouncing the occupation of Ukraine. Really,
all the kettle black, isn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing how these things come up on the news, and people just read the headline and go, "Wow, thank you, Israel. You're doing a great job here." So, peace is always our first option. Still is. We hope for a generation of Israelis that say enough is enough. Let's live together. We actually don't want to live with them. Give us our state and keep the stolen land that you took in 48. Just give us what the international law says is ours.
It reminds me of a quote by Yasser Arafat, and I know it's a quote that you know very well, that he gave at the United Nations, where he says, "I come with a
freedom fighter
olive branch in one hand and a freedom fighter's gun in the other. Don't let me drop the olive branch."
We never dropped the gun, except for Mahmoud Abbas. He not only dropped the gun, he dropped more than the gun, and maybe his trousers even.
He dropped the ball occasionally.
Yeah, he did. But not just him, it seems to be a trend now to be submissive and surrender for financial gains. But that doesn't take from the political party that he's the head of. In fact, most of the people in Palestine that belong to Fatah are now extremely, agitated with the way things are going. Not to also forget that now we have organized groups like in Nablus. You have Arin al-Usud, and you have the Jenin Brigade, you have the Tul Karam Brigade, and then obviously Kata'ib Shuhada al-Aqsa, the Al-Aqsa brigades as well are coming back, and they're not following the leadership of Mahmoud Abbas. They're doing their own thing to try and protect and preserve whatever is left from our honor and our safety in our villages. So we have to talk about that too.
So I think this evening, we might have to wrap it up there. To be honest, what I'd like to do is we would like to get you back on very soon. Okay. I feel like we've been letting the side down in that it's taken this long to get you on. So if you're happy to come back on very soon, we'd love to see you again. I know our audience would love to hear more of it, and we'll see if we can get this as a semi-regular event.
I am more than happy to do a regular thing. Even we can obviously discuss that after this is over. And yes, I'm more than happy to do that. And I know there's a lot we haven't covered, and I would definitely like to come out and see you again, Chris. And thank you very much for having me.
Soon. Now we're such a short ocean between us now.
Oh, we can do it. We can do it. Hopefully face to face soon. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, for our viewers at home, thank you very much for watching the Ministry of Propaganda, and you will see us in the week.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Chris.